You don't just think, you replay. Every word, every moment, every tiny detail that most people forget within seconds, somehow that stays with you. And the strange part is, you already know you're overthinking, but you still can't stop. It's like your mind doesn't trust silence. Like it believes that if it just thinks a little more, it might finally find peace, but it never does. Instead, it pulls you deeper. Because what most people don't understand is this: overthinking isn't just thinking too much. It's your brain trying to protect you from embarrassment, from regret, from making the same mistake. Psychologically, this is linked to something called rumination, a loop where the brain keeps revisiting the same thoughts, hoping. But here's the twist. Your brain treats thoughts like problems, even when there's nothing left to solve. So it keeps digging and digging and digging until something simple becomes heavy, until a small moment becomes a full story, until one sentence you said 3 days ago turns into a version of you that you don't even recognize anymore. And somewhere, in that process, you lose the present. Because while your body is here, your mind is stuck somewhere else, replaying past conversation, or rehearsing a future that hasn't happened. And this is where it gets dangerous. Not in a dramatic way, but in a quiet, invisible way. Because over time, overthinking slowly rewires how you see yourself. You start questioning things you once felt sure about. Did I say too much? Did they mean something else? Did I mess that up? And the more you ask these questions, the less you trust your own instincts. There's actually a psychological pattern behind this. The more you analyze your behavior, the more self-conscious you become. And the more self-conscious you become, the more your brain searches for flaws. It's like standing in front of a mirror for too long. At first, you see yourself. Then you start noticing tiny imperfections, and eventually that's all you can see. But here's something most people never realize. Overthinking doesn't come from weakness. It often comes from awareness. You notice things others don't.
Your mind is constantly collecting data, trying to make sense of the world. And
that's not a flaw, that's intelligence. But when that intelligence turns inward without control, it becomes a trap. Because now, instead of understanding the world, you're analyzing yourself constantly, relentlessly. And the worst part, it feels productive. It feels like you're figuring things out, like you're gaining clarity. But in reality, you're going in circles. There's a concept in psychology called the analysis paralysis, where thinking too much actually stops you from acting at all. You hesitate, you delay, you second-guess decisions that should have taken seconds. And slowly you start missing moments, not because you don't care, but
because you care too much. And right here is where most people get stuck, because they believe the solution is
to fix their thoughts, to find the perfect answer, the perfect mindset, the perfect way to finally feel at peace. But what if that's the problem? What if the constant need to resolve every thought is the very thing keeping you trapped? Because there's something about overthinking that nobody tells you. It feeds on certainty. The more you try to be sure about everything, the more your mind finds things to question. And it never ends, because life itself isn't certain. Which means your mind is trying to solve something that has no final answer. And once you realize that, something shifts, but not in the way you expect. Because the real question isn't, how do I stop overthinking? It's something much deeper than that. Because the real question isn't, how do I stop overthinking? It's, why does my mind... But for someone who thinks too much peace can feel unfamiliar, almost uncomfortable. There's a reason for that. When you're the brain spends years scanning for problems, predicting outcomes, and preparing for worst-case scenarios. It gets used to noise. It gets used to tension. So when things are finally quiet, your mind doesn't relax. It searches, because silence feels like something is missing. And this is where the cycle deepens. You're not overthinking because there's too much to think about. You're overthinking because your mind doesn't know what to do without it. There's a psychological principle called the default mode. It's network. It's the part of your brain that activates when you're not focused on anything external. And for people who overthink, this system becomes overactive, meaning even in moments of rest, your mind is still working, still analyzing, still replaying, still trying to connect dots that don't need to be connected. And over time, this becomes your normal. You wake up tired not because you didn't sleep, but because your mind never really stopped. And then something subtle begins to happen. You start confusing thoughts with reality. Not completely, but just enough. A possibility starts to feel like a fact.
A fear starts to feel like truth. A what if starts to shape how you behave. And suddenly you're not reacting to life as it is. You're reacting to life as your mind imagines it. That's why overthinking can feel so.
Because you're not just living one version of reality. You're living dozens all at once. But here's the part
that changes everything. Your thoughts are not always trying to tell you the truth. Sometimes they're just trying to protect you,
even if it means exhausting you. Your brain would rather keep you alert than risk you being caught off.
So it creates scenarios, replays moments, builds stories, not because they're real, but because they feel safer than uncertainty.
And once you see that you stop fighting your thoughts the same way, because fighting them only gives them more
importance, it's like arguing with an echo. The louder you get, the louder it comes back. So instead, something shifts in. You start observing. Not every thought needs a response. Not every question needs an answer. And not every feeling needs
to be analyzed. Some things are meant to pass. And that's difficult at first, because letting a thought go feels like losing control. But in reality, it's the first moment you gain it, because control was never about managing every thought. It was about choosing which ones deserve your attention. And slowly, very slowly, your mind begins to breathe again. Not because the thoughts disappear, but because they stop controlling you. You still notice things. You still feel deeply.
Still think more than most people ever will. But now there's space. Space between you and your thoughts. Space where you can just exist without needing to figure everything out.
And in that space, you start to find something you've been chasing this whole time. Not answers, not certainty, but something quieter, something steadier. A kind of peace that doesn't come from solving everything, but from finally accepting that not everything needs to be solved. And maybe that's the real shift. Not becoming someone who doesn't think, but becoming someone who isn't controlled by every thought. Because the truth is, your mind was never the enemy. It was just trying to protect you in the only way it knew how. And once you understand that, you stop seeing overthinking as something to fight and start seeing it as something to outgrow, not by force, but by awareness. And maybe tonight, when your mind starts replaying everything again, you won't try to silence it. You'll just listen for a moment and then let it pass. Because not every thought is a message. Some are just noise, and you were never meant to carry all of it.